Family, welcome back to another episode of Bethel Uplift. You can join us every Thursday at 7 p.m. on YouTube and Facebook for Bethel Uplift. Family, we are joined literally by a living legend. Family, do me a favor, clap it up for Dr. Bill Banfield. Dr. Banfield, he got his Master of Divinity from the historic Boston University School of Theology. He got his Doctor of Philosophy in Composition and Musicology from the University of Michigan. He is an author. He is a playwright. He is a composer. He is a theologian and a scholar. He's the founding director of Black Studies and professor emeritus at Berklee College of Music. Family, let's clap it up again for Dr. Bill Banfield. Well, my brother.
Thank you for that. Very, very kind words. Like they say, your check is in the mail.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Well, you're no stranger to Bethel. You're an exhorter at the AME Church, and you've been doing so much great work in the community, really around helping us think theologically, helping us think significantly about the role of popular culture and in this intersection with the church. So we want to jump right into it, man, as we're in Black History Month. And I want to ask you our first question. And take your time. How would you describe the current state of the Black church? How would you describe the current state of the Black church?
Honestly? No, you come out the gate banging with that one, man. It's just like, I think you ask a very important question because of the reverence and the importance of the Black church historically is a critical component of African American life for sure. And then we go on to look at American life, the global diaspora, and how important and revolutionary the Black church has been, particularly, and the notion of the way in which it has been a critical part of Black people defining themselves and redefining themselves in a state of chaos, in the state of chains. And Christ and God and Spirit tells us to break those chains. So the Black church has been a critical part of everything great about Black folk. But I'm a person who was born in the 1960s and watched the role of the church being transformative in how people lived and understood the values of how to live life in the world, in the spirit and in the world. And since those times, you've been able to watch the transformation of culture and how the Black church has had to, because it's a part of culture, to be a part of that motion forward. And so we get to this 2023 and we're asking ourselves, what is the role of the Black church today? And what is the responsibility of the church to be still walking with Black people today? That's where the crisis of the Black church is right now. It's in a crisis of irrelevancy, actually. And so what we need to talk about in terms of Black Christians and Black spiritually led people is how do we marry again the importance and the role of the church in the lives of everyday people today in 2023 and beyond. That's a challenging question for us when we look at the church. And is the church ready for that challenge? It has been for hundreds of years. So we're waiting. We're waiting for transformation right now, but churches are doing great work in every city, every village, every place. So we have to value that great work. But if we're honest to ask, I'm being professorial here with a long answer to your question, like how is the church doing today? I think it has this challenge. It has this challenge, but we follow the spiritual path of great thinkers and teachers who taught us to rise to that challenge. So that's why it's so good to be here with you today to talk about that.
Amen. Family, there's so much in that first question. I love the way that you shared is that in the moment of chaos, the Black church has helped Black people self-define who they are.
Oh, yeah.
Like this idea of self-definition is so important, particularly for us living in a culture of corrupt capitalism where everyone is trying to win. Everyone is trying to get ahead. Everyone is trying to really ways, adopt the ways of being of whiteness, if you will, all of the corrupt parts of whiteness. And so in many ways, you're sharing that, the role of the Black church is to help Black people self-define who they are in a culture of corruption is quite powerful. The other part that you named, which we can actually see in a tangible way, particularly with COVID happening, there's been like a deep falling away from the church. and that the black church has struggled, to your point, to be relevant.
Yeah.
How could the black church be relevant more in today's culture, and why aren't we relevant, or as relevant as we once were?
My personal feeling is that the church positions itself in doctrine and positions itself in a mode of being which I think is the wrong direction. I'll get in trouble with that perhaps. But what people should, you measure a person by their notion of what they see as the values that define and sustain their life. And when we understand why people value things, then we understand how they are willing to live and die for what they think, and not what they think, what they believe, and what they feel defines their existence. It's an existential question. And so I think that the church is so busy with the trappings of doctrine in church that it could do a better job, I feel, in my personal vision of belief, of teaching and getting people to understand the values by which they live. And when you understand the values that define the way you live and be in the world, you can be a better you. And I think faith is about that. The substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, all these kinds of things. Yeah. And I think we get that from the church, but I think the church is an institution too. You talk about corruption and commercialism. And I think it gets trapped in trying to find itself being successful in a model that doesn't really isn't about the things that you and I are talking about, and our wonderful friends are listening about the role of spirituality and the role of faith, and how Christians are defined by that sense of that by the author of at least our particular faith. One aspect of in Christ's notion of to live by love, you know. And to love each other and to help each other and to work hard and to have that kind of excellence that's a part of our value system. So I think when the church helps us to understand that sense of how we define our values and live by those, and not doctrine, not doctrine. Doctrine is, that's something somebody wrote, you know what I'm saying? How you live and believe has to do with the values. And I think we should talk to the church about teaching a value-based living existence. And I think we'd be a more healthy church in modern times if we did that.
Yeah, here you lifted up these great tenets around, like how do we support one another in terms of how we live out our values.
Yeah,
that's really important. That people are more persuaded, both people who are true to our faith and folks who don't really know about the gospel of Jesus, or folks who might call unchurched. When they see us living out our values, and I think in beautiful and tangible ways that leads to the changing of the material conditions of Black people, it makes us more relevant. I love it. Paul says it this way. He says, "I become all things to all people, and this I do for the sake of the gospel, that I might save some." And so for me, when people start talking about how relevant the church is, I'm always listening, because I would agree with you to some extent that I do worry about the church in 40 to 50 years, because the desire for people to want to be associated with the church, I think, has waned over the years.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. You said something before we started. Brother Bill and I, we were joking, and Brother Bill was giving some straight knowledge before we even start rolling the camera. But you said something to the degree that, art and music just are the way we move in the world. Like, our arts has really been the saving grace of Black people in this country. Can you just say more about what do you mean by that? What that
How much time do we have?
We got time, man.
No. Well, that really actually defines what my theological focus was at the graduate level as a young person here in Boston. I'm from Detroit, great Black city. I came here as a young person, and when I decided to go to get my training in a seminary, in theology, it was theology and the arts. Those two things were very, very. Well, I was a musician, and I was a Boston public school teacher as a young person, and so my first teaching job here, I saw how young people were activated by the culture they lived in. And certainly, music is very important. So I wanted to go to the seminary to understand how music and culture actually is religiosity or is a faith-based kind of activity. And my master's thesis was about that. It was about that in black music. And I went to West Africa and studied, and I came with that, and the philosophy that I got from these seminaries, Harvard included, was that we needed to have a theology that was spiritually based on a transformative action and something that could go across the boundaries of the boxes we create in culture, and that the thing that does that more powerfully is music and arts. And from the African notion of spirituality, the notion of, in Descartes said, we think, therefore we are, but in the African notion is we think, therefore, we are because we are. That's what our thinking is. It has to do with not thinking about it. It is the notion of spirituality and the connection with the theos, the spirit. So we think because we are. It's about us as a people and about a culture. And the Spirit descends with that idea, and then people are moved. And one of the things that causes in the Spirit is sound and phenomenology of music and singing. And so that's why people in the African diaspora know where we are. We're in Cuba or we're in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's the same African spirituality. So I learned that, I breathed that as a musician, but then I learned what my breathing entailed by being able to study and think about culture in larger places than just Detroit or America. I looked at the African diaspora and saw how deep that was with these same things. And so it all revolves around culture and beingness, and music carries that. So I've always, you and I've talked about this, and it's like a really, the whole training was a theology of culture. And a theology of the arts. And first classes that I taught were the theology of American popular music. That I think we can look at everything that's done in music as having a theology.
That's good. I love the connections that you made about the way we move and live in the world as African people. Like I think about the point you made about Descartes, where he says, "I think, therefore I am." But I think about the philosophy of Ubuntu, where it suggests that I am because we are.
Yeah.
Because our way of being, you just feel it. When you're with black folks, you can just feel the move of the Spirit. That's why when you go to church, if the choir ain't rocking, you ain't had church.
You ain't had no church. Yeah.
It's like, what was that? Because there's a feeling associated with the thinking and the values. True story. When I was, we were in a secular place. We were in Ghana for the year return back in 2019, and my wife and I, we walked in we weren't in church for New Year's night. We were in a celebration, a Ghanaian celebration. Yeah. We walked in. It was black folks from across the world.
Sure.
And it was a secular song. I'm not going to name the song. I forgot the artist. It was a song. Family, it's not a Holy Ghost song, so don't look it up. But it was a song by a rapper. I never forgot it because I Shazammed it. It was called March Madness. And I'm not being funny. Literally, you could literally see people's bodies moving in unison and literally in the midst of this secular moment. I'm not lying to you, Brother Bill.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, God, but like it feels like God's in this place. Like
That's right.
There was something about us being together, moving, engaging in music, engaging in the arts.
No, you talk about moving together, and interesting enough, we talked a little about, I don't want to date myself here, but I do remember the 60s, I was a baby now, but I still was breathing the impulses of the 60s. And when you move to the 70s and 80s, the one thing that people did with that music, I'm from Detroit, so we really understood the power of music to move the world. I mean, Motown was the quintessential black business in the 70s and 80s. The biggest black business in the world was Motown. And when people were together and they were moving to that spirit you talk about, that black spirit, they were also moving in the mind, you see. And so dancing in the streets had everything to do with transforming the streets. Yeah. So we never saw a disconnect in black culture, particularly about when people got together to celebrate. That's ritual. And that movement you talk about, that spiritual sensibility, has to do with how we understood that that's the moment where the Spirit descends and consciousness happens.
Yeah.
And so you begin to think about the world you live in because it's the world you move in. You see, it's that movement. And then there was all these things songs that underline that,
That's good, man.
all kinds of things. So I love that you said that in the room, people were moving. And so that was a time when the Spirit was activated, but it's also people's feet were moving to make a difference in the world that we live in.
I feel like preaching, Reverend. Like that,
That's why we did. That's all right. You preach it. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
but it was good because when I think about it, you talked about this deep intersection between the movement of the body and the movement of the mind. When I go back to that moment on New Year's in 2019, we're all there to celebrate the year of the return, the year of us, of what happened to us as a people. So we're moving intellectually to a space to celebrate, but our bodies were also moving in unison. So I think about movement building and the liberation politics of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
That's very true. You're putting it together for us. Is that the movement of the body through the songs that we sang was also helping us move together intellectually, which is so powerful.
George Clinton, free your mind and your what will follow. We won't say the word, but your behind will follow. That's not derogatory. It's that your body will follow, but you got to free your mind. And people need to wake up because their minds are locked. This is a problem, and you can blame it on, like you said, commercialism. You can even blame it on religion. Sometimes people are locked. Well, no, you're gonna get me in trouble. You talk about the saints out there. I'm not getting in trouble with the saints, but I think that's part of the importance right now about figuring out where we are today. I think a lot of times we get locked. It's not our fault. It's just that we fall into patterns of being locked in these boxes, and we prescribe to those locked boxes. And sometimes religion can be a locked box. So we got to figure out always, those of us that everybody's thinking about that, how to not get locked in those boxes and to free our minds so that we can be progressive and move forward and be healing in the way we move and transformative, but also be accountable to the kind of motion and work and decisions we make in the world to be on that new path. I think we have to be on new paths. New paths.
As you're talking about this idea of freeing your mind, unlocking boxes, being on a new path, let me ask you, what could the church do in this moment to possibly pivot to allow for the freeing and the liberation of Black people? Like, what are some things we should be doing to allow for that?
If you look at models, I think about in the AME church, we had have a great model in the founder of this church and that Bethel community. They also were secular and spiritual because they had a secular group called the Free African Society, locked with African identity and notion of freedom and forward. And so the Bethel AME Church was actually called the Free African Society before it under its great founder that they did all the things they did to start building their church and build at least the AME as a progressive wing of Black thought. I think that there needs to be a new tuning today. In the same way, I think that the church unfortunately gets locked in its things, and we got to take that box and unlock that box again and let people be free to think and to train people how to use that freedom of thought to move progressively forward. So I think that the church needs to have a reckoning with itself. The notion of relevancy that you brought up, so don't quote me on that. You said that. And then he said, we have the camera going on here. The camera people here that are great technicians that are helping us will say, they heard you say it first. The church needs to have a reckoning with its notion of a rebooting. Everybody says that in technology today. To reboot and not be afraid. They just stop the cameras. Yeah. You know what, church? Let's just sit down for a minute and talk. Yeah. We have some problems here. Nobody's willing to do that. I won't say nobody, because I know that there's some very progressive pastors and preachers all over this great land and in the world that I really take time to talk to their parishioners about what time it is. It's great songs, what time it is. I mean, think about Marvin Gaye. What's going on? What's going on? Yeah. Mama, there's too many of you dying. I mean, we could be singing that every day and it'd be real as it was then. And that's a great song, which I think, you asked me a little bit about why music is so powerful, and because it transcends and it transforms the times. And so you can find a great song, it's a great sermon. I say this, I get in trouble with preachers. You're a preacher all the time. Like sermon's okay, but a song teaches the way. And it sings the way. You got to sing people to freedom. That's the way our people work. And not only our people, I think every culture. Wow. You know, you can see a North Korean or South Korean woman, you know, I saw a film, just singing her humanity into place. It's an existential move that has to do with body and spirit and psyche. And songs and music and culture allow us to do that. That's why it's so important. So great songs are very important. When the songs die, the people die, which is why your people having some problems right now. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? You know, I don't want to be an old fogey of the music, but I grew up in a period, and you followed very, very quickly after that, where the music still reverberated around people waking up to the world we live in. So I think the church should, in some ways, look to the power of our art and culture. Dance, poetry, painting, and certainly music were always a critical part of the equipment for equipping Black people in the world.
Yeah. You know, this is really interesting because I would say, to your point, I believe you, I totally agree with you. I love the way that you talked about how we're called to sing our way and back into our humanity. That's beautiful. Yeah. Even when we think about work that's going around in the area of trauma-informed care, there's a great organization actually run by Reverend Liz Walker called Can We Talk. It's a phenomenal organization, but part of their model of thinking about trauma-informed care, they're actually using art and culture as a way to help healing come to their parishioners. And I think in the same way, like, you know, part of our healing is wrapped up in art and culture, in our music, and our dance, and our poetry. And so in many ways, I hear you saying, like, we need to figure out how to re-sing our way back into humanity. Let me ask you this. You know, growing up, I always heard the scripture, you are in the world, but you're not of the world. And in many ways, a lot of the secular things were things that we should not engage in. Let me ask you this. Why should the church be concerned about popular culture?
No, because that's where the impulses of the people are. That you want to find out where the people are, you got to go to popular culture. They ain't in church. Come on, man. Come on, man. Let's be real. You know. So I would say that my first sermon at the AME when I got my, you know, was if you want to know where the spirit is, you got to go where the people are. You want to be Jesus? Yeah. Jesus wasn't hanging out he was turning over tables in the temples because they weren't acting right. So I'm gonna be with the people. Let's go with them because I got 5,000 I need to feed. You see? You see? So I think the church has to have that kind of mobility. Actually, it's nice to have a temple on the street corner, but you know, you don't cut off the heat and the air conditioning at 3:00. You know, there's a lot of people, you know, you still got to get to. So I think that's kind of where a discussion should be. You know, how do we be mobile? You know, you speak about jazz and education. I was mentored by a guy named Dr. Billy Taylor, and he had something called the Jazz Mobile, and it was a mobile. It went out into the communities, and the musicians would play jazz, and the young people would see it. Oh my goodness! Well, we can listen to the radio, but these are real musicians playing in the streets, and you know, I think that kind of street corner preaching. You know, in Harlem in the days in the 40s and 50s, and you read about this at Harold Cruz. I taught under Harold Cruz. I was his TA, and he used to talk about what was going on in Harlem. There was a philosopher at every corner. There was somebody was going to the Baptist church over here. There was an A&M preacher over here, but there was a Marcus Garveyite over here. You know what I'm saying? So every corner had a perspective. But those preachers, guess where they were? They were on the street. They were on the street telling the good news and telling the good news within the purview of other good newses. So your news is only as good as everybody else's news is. You got to compete with that. And so that I thought that was really interesting that Harold Cruz would talk about that. That you could walk in Harlem and hear Garveyites over here and hear the the different philosophical perspectives, including all the different black perspectives. So I think the church has to have itself also in the streets.
That's good. You know, two things I think about. One movie by Spike Lee with Malcolm X, which shows that scene where that you see like someone from the Nation of Islam here, a preach over there. It was It was really great. But the other thing I think about, which is really true to our scripture, is Jesus hanging out eating with sinners, and the religious leaders of his time said like, "What are you doing eating with sinners? That's you should be doing that as a rabbi." He says, I didn't come to save the righteous, but sinners unto repentance. And so for you, your answer, I think the beauty of your answer, you said we should be concerned about popular culture because that's where the people are.
That's where the people live.
That's where the people live, man.
Now there's those of us that can do it, that have the next step is to be accountable to the needs of the people, is to also transform the popular culture in a way that serves the people and not entertains the people. You see? See, the big E in education has to do with enlightenment and engagement. And you have to be very, very, in the industry, accountable to that kind of messaging and that kind of accountability, accountable to the accountability, which is that you have to also demand that the larger popular culture also be equipped to transform the times that we're in. And it has the power to do that. It reaches millions. I mean, we have a discussion here where there's 100 people maybe or 50 people. I don't know how many people watch these, but they watch them apart from what we're doing now. There's going to be someone that is obviously going to be inspired by you. I mean, your work as a minister, as a person of God, that's going to be inspiring. So that's the use of technology to actually do transformative work. So I think it's our responsibility also, the responsibility is to use the power of the technology and the popular culture to be a pulpit, actually, in some ways, for these things. And I think we have to hold the cultural gatekeepers accountable to that.
I love the way you said that, like this idea we have to use popular culture not to entertain the people, but to serve the people, to enlighten the people.
That's right.
Because I will say, there is with all platforms, there's such a spectacle. Like part of the way that preachers make their money even today is to have larger platforms, have larger followers, to literally almost entertain people, to engage in the seduction of the superficial spectacle, to get followers and to get people. But you're saying something different, brother. You said, no, I'm getting it from you.
You're preaching
You're
now.
saying something different. That our role in terms of engaging the world is simply to enlighten people back to the values that are rooted in Jesus, that are rooted in what you call the black spirit. And so I love that. Last question, man. When I grew up, I wanted to be just like you.
Oh, get out of here.
You talk about being, I didn't even know you were a TA to Harold Cruz. Like, oh my goodness. That's amazing.
Yeah.
If you could share with us, like, what are, for future young leaders, like, what are some things that you did to kind of get where you are today?
Well, one of the things is that I listen to my parents. Everybody got to listen to mama and daddy or auntie or grandmama or uncle. I came from Detroit, which is a powerful black city. Black people knew what time it was, and they took care of their communities, and they were progressive. And it was a powerful city, powerful music base. It was black church of all kinds. But my parents encouraged me to continue to seek people who were wisdom seekers and griots. So when I went to Africa, I learned about griots, blah blah blah, and that's very important. I teach that as a teacher, the importance of the griot, that West African spiritual teacher, cultural bearer, who sang the songs and practiced the values of those songs, so that people could live that out. That's what the role of the griot is. But I was very blessed to be embraced at that age, at the college age, of people like Cornel West and Henry Louis Gates, and because they knew I was teaching under the great scholar Harold Cruz when they came to Ann Arbor when I was there. So I met them early on, and well, you keep on, young brother. They were 10 years my senior, and they've been great mentors. but being able to be mentored by Toni Morrison, who I was her visiting artillery professor at Princeton for a year, and being under her, I was lucky. I'm not boasting now. I was blessed to be under these kinds of leaders at national levels that they said, oh, young brother, I like what you're doing. Keep doing that. So I think that we have to be great models for younger people that's our other responsibility, to model excellence and model spirituality and model progressive thinking and model love and care so that other younger people see that and say, that's what I want to be. Unfortunately, we have a powerful media that doesn't project you and not doing any of those things. Yeah. That's the problem. And unfortunately, with the models that we have, whether it's the house, I can't say the word, I don't want to get in trouble, the house ladies of Atlanta or the house cleaners of Cleveland or whatever, all these kind of shows where too many of your people like, that's us. No, it's not. That's the foolishness. Don't model foolishness in front of my people or any young people. That's the accountability that the media and the popular culture have to be called into accountability about. How you model and write and produce things that are poisonous to people is a crime. And so I think that what we have to do as an alert group of people today, young people, you too old, man. We're not talking about you. We're talking about the younger people. Yes, sir. We have to be the models, but what's modeled in front of those younger people is excellence and spiritual integrity and love and those kinds of things. Those things are unfortunately out of fashion. Ignorance and foolishness is in fashion, and that's what we have to fight. And we have to be courageous and stand up against it. I was going to say your people are not courageous enough today. But I know I was going to get in trouble with that one. Let's just say the general public is not as courageous as they used to be or they need to be. They have to stand up against stupidity, stand up against hate, stand up against greed. Those are things that you talked about when we first started talking about. Corruption in the economy. And to look at these, those are not the values we should aspire towards, but the values of other things that you've helped us to talk about. So I think that that's kind of what we need to continue to figure out how to do.
Amen, Dr. Banfield. There's so much here, family, that Dr. Banfield shared with us that's so powerful. And if I could just summarize real quick that previous answer, which is so powerful, that we're called to courage. We're called to place love over greed. We're also, when we think about the person of Jesus, we're called to live counterculturally. When it comes down to it, that if we expect to live out the values of our current culture, we're going to continue to fail as a people. We'll continue to fail in terms of trying to share the love ethic of Jesus. But if we live counterculturally, liberation is not only attainable, but liberation will come if we live counterculturally. Family, if you enjoyed this, I'm clapping for you.
No, I'm clapping for you.
Family, if you enjoyed this podcast, Bethel Uplift, you want to share this on Facebook, you want to share this on YouTube. Also, if you want to learn more about Dr. Bill Banfield, he's going to be one of our lecturers and scholars for our Bethel Summer Institute. And so we'll be sharing more about that in weeks to come. We're so grateful to have a member of Bethel, Reverend Dr. Bill Banfield, with us here today. Clap it up for him one more time. Family, you can join us on Thursday at 7 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube for Bethel Uplift. God bless you. Wow.
Oh, man. Yeah. Jesus up in your lift, brother. I know that's right.
Yeah. That's good. Amen. Yeah, man. Amen. Well, thank you all for helping out with that.